Hakan, is it all right?
Yeah, sure.
So I would very much like to introduce our speaker today, Hakan Tarhan, who is a PhD candidate in analysis and management of cultural heritage in IMT, School for Advanced Studies at Lucca in Italy. But Hakan and I, we go way back, way back to at least further back, because Hakan joined the survey and excavation at Aspendos in 2014 and 2016, when he was doing an MA at Boğaziçi University in tourism administration. Afterwards, he went on to start a PhD in Lucca, but he also spent 2 years in the heritage management of University of Kent and Athens University, in the business and economics and business department, so in Greece. And from July 2018 to April 2019, he was also a visiting PhD researcher and Erasmus Plus trainee at our sister institution, the British School at Athens. Last academic year, then, Hakan was fellow was the BIAA Anamet joint fellow in heritage studies at the Anamet Research Center of Koç University in Istanbul. His PhD research on public perception of the other's heritage, Ottoman heritage in Greece and Byzantine heritage in Turkey, investigates the public perception of this particular heritage from the perspective of the states and the citizens. Now, the title of the PhD already shows that the topic tonight, public perception of the other's heritage, Ottoman heritage in Greece, is actually only half of the PhD. And unfortunately, the reason for that is the current pandemic. COVID interfered in Hakan's PhD on a massive scale, because whereas he had been able to already do all the interviews and research for the one half, he was supposed to start doing the research on the Greek heritage and Greek and Byzantine heritage in Turkey last year, but then COVID hit. So that's why today we can only hear half of the actual topic. Nevertheless, this talk will focus on Greece Ottoman heritage for the reasons just mentioned, and we'll discuss more specifically the public perceptions of both state and people towards Ottoman heritage in Greece. It will analyze how it's being treated today and to define to what extent it has been incorporated into the daily lives and personal identities of the contemporary communities. So, Hakan, without further ado, I would like to ask you to start your lecture.
Sorry. Once again. I think I cannot share it now. All right.
Why not? You should be able to.
Yeah, okay. That's good.
All right, that's better.
So, yeah. Thank you very much for your kind introduction, Lieutenant. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. My name is Hakan Tarhan, and I'm a PhD candidate in Analysis and Management of Cultural Heritage in IMT Lucca, Italy. First of all, before I begin, I would like to thank the BIAA and the ANAMET for the generous fellowship I received in 2019 and 2020 academic year, which highly contributed to this research. I would also like to thank all the other ANAMET fellows at the time whose comments and recommendations have helped me to improve my work a lot. Today, I'm going to present you a part of my ongoing PhD research, which is titled Public Perception of the Other's Heritage, Ottoman Heritage in Greece and Byzantine Heritage in Turkey. As this is a work in progress, your comments and recommendations would be very precious for me. First, I would like to start with a brief introduction of my PhD project, and then I will continue with the Ottoman heritage in Greece part, which I will be discussing today. My research aims to investigate public perceptions towards the other's heritage by focusing on the Byzantine heritage in Turkey and the Ottoman heritage in Greece as its case studies. The reasons behind this study is to understand how the heritages of those who were once marginalized by the official discourse as the other are being treated today, and to what extent these heritages have been incorporated into the daily lives and personal identities of their contemporary communities. The French Revolution in 1789 resulted in the collapse of the empires and monarchies throughout the world and in the formation of nation states. Following the ideologies of the French Revolution, as well as those of the European Enlightenment, the Greek War of Independence from the Ottoman Empire has started, and Greece was recognized as an independent sovereign state with the London Protocol of 1830. On the other side of the story, the defeat of the Ottoman Empire in the First World War, the subsequent occupation of Istanbul, and the partition of lands by the Treaty of Ser led to the foundation of Turkish national movement and the Turkish War of Independence. The Treaty of Lausanne in 1923 ended the conflict and defined the borders of the modern Turkish Republic. One of the most decisive practices among the nation states is the use of the past and cultural heritage as a tool of nation building and creating homogeneity. Accordingly, national discourses which glorify a shared and owned national heritage while disregarding the heritage of the other are created. Both Greece and Turkey underwent through such processes of identity formation and utilization of the past and cultural heritage, which eventually resulted in the denial, neglect, and to some extent in the demolition of the other's heritage in both countries. At this point of the presentation, I would like to explain some of the terms I'm using in my study very briefly. First of all, what is public? According to Merriman, there are two specific meanings of the term. The first is the association of the word public with the state and its institutions, which emerges in the era of the intensive state formation from the early modern period and onwards. The second is the concept of the public as a group of individuals who debate issues and consume cultural products and whose reactions inform public opinion. This notion developed during the Enlightenment. In the context of my research, with the term public, I refer both to the state and state institutions and to the people, more specifically, the local inhabitants of the towns I selected as my case studies. And what do I mean by perception? In the most basic sense, by perception, I mean the state's treatment of these particular heritages in legal terms and practical terms, and the people's feelings and attitudes towards the heritage of the other. In terms of the state perception, it includes the recognition, preservation, and promotion of the other's heritage. And in terms of the people's perception, I mean the value attached and interest shown to these monuments by the public, feelings of ownership and responsibility, and the involvement of these monuments in the collective and personal histories and identities of the people. How is the other defined? In order to define the other, it is also necessary to define what constitutes us. And to do that, in my research, I go back to the foundation of these modern nation states and investigate the processes of national identity construction and the pillars of these identities. As a definition of a nation and national identity, I follow Anthony Smith. A nation is a named human community occupying a homeland and having common needs and a shared history, a common public culture, a single economy, and common rights and duties for all members. And he defines national identity as the continuous reproduction and reinterpretation of the patterns of values, symbols, memories, myths, and traditions that compose the distinctive heritage of nations and the identifications of individuals with that pattern and heritage and with its cultural elements. It is important to stress the continuous reproduction and reinterpretation here, as these terms, such as identity, us, and them, are very fluid constructs and continuously being recreated, shifting, changing, and evolving. My argument in this study, which I also used in selecting my case studies, is that within the Greek-Turkish context, especially following the Treaty of Lausanne and the exchange of populations, the most distinctive characteristics between these two nations has been religion. And lastly, in the context of my research, the Ottoman Byzantine terminology is related to the chronology. Therefore, when I say the Ottoman or Byzantine monuments, it means that the monuments built in the Ottoman era and the Byzantine era. But in addition to that, the distinctive characteristics of Greek-Turkish identities I just mentioned, in my research, in the selection of case studies, I mainly focused on monuments that represent these characteristics, and namely the religious architecture. Accordingly, I formulated the main research questions as what is the public as the state and the people perception towards the Byzantine heritage in Turkey, and what is the public perception towards the Ottoman heritage in Greece? And the secondary research questions are, in investigating the state's perceptions, to what extent do the existing laws and regulations regarding cultural heritage include the Byzantine or Ottoman heritage? To what extent the Byzantine Ottoman heritage is involved in the state's cultural policies? How do the state's perception affect the preservation of the other's heritage? As for the people's perceptions, to what extent the locals perceive this heritage to be a part of their history and personal identity? Do the locals think these monuments are valuable for their city? How are the locals involved with this heritage in their daily lives? How do the locals' perception affect the preservation of the other's heritage? And how am I going to answer these questions? In terms of the state's perceptions, firstly, I focus on laws and regulations and investigate the evolution of the regulatory frameworks, the changes in the terminology, their inclusiveness of the other's heritage, and the protection it provides for them. In addition, I study the cultural policy documents, such as development plans and tourism strategies, and where applicable, like in the context of Ayasofya Istanbul, I analyze the speeches of government officials and professionals from the relevant ministries and bodies overseeing the preservation of these cultural assets. In terms of the people's perceptions, which I will be discussing today, I focus on two towns as case studies from each country, Trikala and Seres from Greece, and Iznik and Trabzon from Turkey, and conduct public opinion surveys with the inhabitants of these towns. These surveys aim at understanding the locals' relationship with the monuments and to what extent they regard these monuments as part of their city's history and identity, as well as their own personal histories and identities. The monuments to be studied are selected according to their original and contemporary functions, physical state, relationship with the contemporary townscape, and the communities involved, such as existence of a neighborhood around the monuments, parties with special interest, etc. By relationship with the contemporary townscape, I mean that I choose old historical monuments that stand alone within the modern neighborhoods, surrounded by contemporary blocks of flats, kind of alienated monuments, instead of monuments that are located within old town areas or historical neighborhoods, which are in harmony within their surroundings, as in Yanina, for example. So now I would like to move on with the case studies I selected from Greece and discuss the results of the public opinion surveys I conducted in this town. Trikala is a city located in Thessaloniki region of Greece, and it is the capital of the Trikala regional unit. The area was inhabited since prehistoric times, and the modern town was built on the remains of the ancient city of Triki, which was also mentioned in the works of Homer. Throughout its medieval history, the city was raided many times by different peoples, such as Goths, Slavs, Normans, and Catalans, and it was finally captured by the Ottomans in 1393. The city remained under the Ottoman rule until 1881, when Thessaly was incorporated in the Kingdom of Greece, following the Convention of Constantinople. During the Ottoman period, the city developed into a financial and cultural center, which was also manifested in its military and civil buildings. According to a census of 16th century, Trikala was inhabited by 644 families, of whom 343 were Christian families and 301 were Muslim families. The population reached 25,000 towards the end of the 18th century, and at this point, most of the city's inhabitants were Muslims. A century later, prior to becoming a part of the Kingdom of Greece, there were 13,000 inhabitants living in the city, 8,000 Christians, 4,000 Muslims, and 1,000 Jewish. Today, according to the 2011 census, the population of Trikala regional unit is around 130,000. The population of the municipality is around 81,000, whereas the urban area has around 61,000 inhabitants. The majority of the city's inhabitants are Greek citizens. Due to its location in the Thessaly plain, which provides most of Greece's corn, maize, and barley production, the main employment and livelihood in Trikala area is associated with agriculture. It is followed by employment in public sector and small private businesses. Apart from its major role in agricultural production, the city of Tricolor is also referred to as the first smart city in Greece. The municipality of Tricolor invests largely in information and communication technologies and sustainable eco-friendly incentives, such as fully automated electric buses, smart lighting systems, promoting usage of electric vehicles and bicycles. The modern city of Tricolor bears the traces of its long and rich history with material remains of different civilizations. One of the notable historical monuments is the castle of Tricolor, which is situated on the northeast side of the city at the top of a hill and holds a strategic position in the area. The castle was built on the remains of a citadel of ancient Turkey and took its final form during the Ottoman period. The clock tower was first built in the mid-17th century, and it was one of the oldest known clock towers in Greece under Ottoman rule. The modern clock tower, on the other hand, was built in 1936 to replace the original one destroyed by an earthquake. Below the castle hill is located the old Varusi neighborhood, which used to be a wealthy Christian district of Trikala. Even though it lost much of its traditional fabric and authenticity today, there are still some traditional houses and historical churches dating from the 16th to the 19th century. In a central location in the city, there's a small archaeological site known as the Asklepios of Triki. The ancient city of Triki was strongly associated with Asklepios, and it continues to be so with modern Trikala as well. As you have seen in my previous slides, there's a statue of the god of medicine in one of the central squares of the modern city. The archaeological excavations in the area uncovered remains of a late Hellenistic Stoic building with floor mosaics, an early Roman bath, and a small Byzantine church. Today, the site is covered with fences, and a permission from the Ephorate of Trikala is needed for a visit. The city's Ottoman history is revealed best in the Osmansha, or locally known as Kuşu Mosque, and the Ottoman baths, which I will be covering shortly. Some of the other historical buildings worth mentioning are the School of Dorothea, which was built in 1875 and houses the Municipality Philharmonic today, the Matsopoulos Mill in an industrial museum and the cultural center that was built in 1884, and the Ottoman Barracks of Trikala, which was built in the second half of the 19th century and today used as the law courts. In addition to these, there are also some notable historical and cultural sites located in the Trikala region. The important prehistoric site Theopatra Cave, where researchers have found evidence of 50,000 years of human presence, is approximately 20 kilometers away from Trikala city center, and the UNESCO World Heritage Site Meteora is located in Trikala regional unit and around 30 kilometers away from the city. Now I would like to talk a bit about the Osmansha Mosque and the Ottoman baths, which I included in my public opinion surveys. The Osmansha Mosque is located in the center of the city, next to the Liteos River, which divides the city in the middle, and on one of the main streets connecting the downtown area to the outskirts and the national roads. The mosque is situated in a very spacious square, which also houses the Ottoman baths, the Chichanis Museum, and the Church of Constantine and Helen. Next to the mosque and the mausoleum is a primary school and a children's playground. Due to its central position in the city and on one of the main traffic routes, the monument is highly visible for residents and visitors alike. Furthermore, because of the other monuments, buildings, and the neighborhood surrounding it, as well as the function of the space as a recreational area, many residents interact with the monument on a daily basis. The mosque and the mausoleum were built by the prominent Ottoman architect Sinan in the 16th century as an endowment of Osman Shah, who was the nephew of Süleyman the Magnificent and the governor of the provinces Tırhala and Morea. Out of the 79 mosques built by Sinan in today's Greek territory, Osman Shah Mosque is the only surviving one. The mosque and the mausoleum were in fact a part of a bigger complex, which also included a medrese, an imaret, an inn, a bath, a school, and a bridge. However, today, the only remaining ones among these buildings are the mosque, the mausoleum, and the foundations of the bath in the old prison complex. Osman Shah Mosque and its mausoleum belong to the Ministry of Culture and Sports, and the responsible authority is the Ephorate of Antiquities of Trikala. The mosque went under restoration in 1996 and 1997. And today, the mosque is open to the public and serves as an exhibition hall and a center for cultural events. The entrance to the mosque is free of charge, On the other hand, the mausoleum is not open for visitation and can only be viewed from the other side. The Ottoman baths were a part of the building complex founded by Osman Shah and was built by Sinan in the 16th century. It was built as a twin bath which had separate entrances and sections for men and women to be able to use simultaneously. In the late 19th century, the monument went under several architectural interventions and was transformed into a prison. During this process, new walls, doors, and windows were added, while some existing ones were torn down and sealed. Among these changes, one of the most significant was the demolition of the domes. The building functioned as a prison between 1893 and 2006, until when a new prison was built out of the city. While renovating the building in order to turn it into a cultural center, the grand plan of the Optimum bath was rediscovered and further works of excavation and restorations took place. The monument was opened to the public as a museum in 2016. The ground floor of the building is serving as a museum of Ottoman baths, with a section dedicated to the building's past as a prison and a space for cultural events, whereas the second floor is the Museum of Vasilis Chichanis, one of the leading Greek composers of modern rebetiko and laiko music, who was born in Tricolor. The building belongs to the municipality, and the Museum of Ottoman baths is managed by the Ephorate of Antiquities of Tricolor. It enjoys the same visibility as the Osmansha Mosque does, as they are located in very close proximity. The admission to the museum is free of charge. Now I would like to move on with the second case study from Greece, which is Ceres. Ceres is located in the Macedonia region, and it's the capital of the Ceres regional unit. The area was continually inhabited since antiquity, but the earliest mention of Ceres dates to 5th century BC. The ancient city was built on a steep hill north of Ceres and held a strategic position in the area. The archaeological finds from the first historical period of Ceres have survived little. They consist of some black painted shells of the 6th or 7th century BC found at the Acropolis. During the Roman times, Ceres was an important city in the province of Macedonia. In the Middle Byzantine period, the city grew importance as a military and an administrative center in the area. Due to this importance, as well as its strategic location, the city became a target for many, and it was invaded in different times by Franks, Bulgarians, and Serbs. Ceres was conquered in 1383 by the Ottoman army commanded by Evrenos and Halil Hayrettin Çandarlı. The city was made the capital of the Sanjak, and the conquerors started building new charitable institutions. Soon, the city became a thriving center of commerce, and it was the third populous town of Macedonia between the 15th and 19th centuries. Evliya Çelebi, who visited the city in the mid-17th century, noted 10 Christian neighborhoods and 30 Muslim neighborhoods. Travelers in the 18th and 19th century also points out to the importance of Ceres as a commercial center. By the end of 19th century, the town also became a major educational center. The city was briefly occupied by Bulgarians during the Balkan Wars, and on the departure, much of the city was burned down. Finally, Ceres was liberated by the Greek army in 1913. During the exchange of populations between Greece and Turkey, the demographics in Ceres changed drastically. According to the 1920 census, the population of the city was around 15,000, while 8 years later, the population rose to 26,000. The arrival of these new populations gave new socio-economic life to the city. Today, according to the 2011 census, the population of Ceres regional unit is around 176,000. The population of municipality is around 77,000, whereas the urban area has around 58,000 inhabitants. The majority of the city's inhabitants are Greek citizens. Apart from the agricultural production within the district, Ceres continues to be an important center for trade. Here are some of the historical sites and monuments in the city of Ceres. The Byzantine castle of Ceres was built on the Acropolis, but when the city was conquered by the Ottomans, the city center moved outside the city walls. Evliya Çelebi, when visited the town in the 17th century, noted that the castle was in fact in ruins. One of the remaining towers of the castle is known as Orestes Tower and was built in 1350 by Orestes for Stephanos, his king, thought to be a reference to the Stephanos Dushan, the king of Serbia. The 14th century Church of Ios Nikolaos is also located on the Acropolis Hill. The Church of Ios Theodoros is a 12th century Byzantine church and located in the center of Ceres. Other important monuments that were built in the Ottoman era are Selçuk Sultan, or also known as Zincirli Chained Mosque, Mehmet Bey Mosque, Mustafa Bay Mosque, and the Ottoman government building, which was built at the end of the 19th century and today being used as the governmental building of Ceres regional unit. Ceres prefecture also has some important historical sites and monuments. Located 55 kilometers away from the Ceres city center, Amphipolis is one of them. The site was discovered in the 19th century by many travelers, but the excavation works started only after the World War II. In 2012, a tomb was discovered inside the Kasta Tumulus, and it was first entered in 2014. It immediately became a hot topic, both within Greece and internationally. The tomb was first speculated to belong to Alexander the Great, and then to one of his generals, Hephaestion. Since then, the site, and especially the tomb itself, is a very famous and receiving wide coverage by the media. The works are still going on, and the tomb is expected to receive visitors from early 2022. The monastery of Timios Prodmos is located 9 kilometers east of the city of Ceres. It was built in 13th century, and many patriarchs rest there. Another important monument is the Rupert Fortress, which was an important World War II resistance monument. The Ottoman Vezistani is located in the center of Ceres. It is a late 15th century building, and it was used as a market for valuable goods such as textiles and precious metal. The building is in a very good physical condition today. It is being used as the Ceres Archaeological Museum, and it is open to the public. Selçuk Sultan Mosque was built in the late 15th century, and it was an endowment by Selçuk Sultan, daughter of Sultan Beyazıt II. It was a part of a bigger complex, which included other buildings, but it is the only surviving monument of the endowment complex today. Selçuk Sultan Mosque is very well restored, and it is being used as a museum and an exhibition hall today. Mehmet Bey Mosque is located on the eastern edge of Ceres. It was built in 1492, and it was also a part of a bigger complex, which was endowed by Mehmet Bey, the husband of Selçuk Sultan. The monument was preserved intact until the beginning of 20th century, and up to 1995, only small interventions were made. From 1995 and onwards, detailed program of restorations took place. Today, the monument is fenced around and closed to the public. Mustafa Bay Mosque is located in the western part of Ceres, and it was constructed in the late 15th century. Like the Mehmet Bey Mosque, this monument as well is fenced around and closed to the public. And with that, I finished presenting my case studies and the selected monuments, and now I would like to move on to the public opinion surveys. At this point, so let's recall once again the research questions I have for the people's perceptions. To what extent do locals perceive this heritage to be a part of their history and personal identity? Do the locals think these monuments are valuable for their city? How are the locals involved with this heritage in their daily lives? How do the locals' perceptions affect the preservation of the other's heritage? In order to answer these questions, public opinion surveys were conducted in Tricolor and Ceres. Here, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Katerina Chinaslanidou and Angeliki Gibirti in helping me out with the questionnaires. The survey was divided into 3 parts: demographics, questions on public interest and attitude towards cultural heritage in general, and public interest and attitude towards the Ottoman heritage in the selected towns. The questionnaires consist of multiple choice, Likert scale, and open-ended questions, and they were conducted face-to-face with citizens of Trikala and Ceres. The participants were selected randomly among the people sitting in the main squares and cafes in popular neighborhoods, as well as working people, depending on their availability and willingness to participate. In total, we managed to receive 107 responses in Trikala and 131 responses in Ceres. Afterwards, the results were analyzed using the SPSS software. Now I would like to move on to the results and present some of the findings of my survey. Due to the limited time of the presentation, I will provide you with a brief analysis of the results that I consider to be more important. First of all, I would like to present the demography of participants. In this survey, around 56% of the participants were female, whereas 44% of them were male, and the average age of the participants was 44. All the participants were living in Tricolor and in Ceres, ranging from 1 year to 84 years. Majority of the participants had a university degree, and around 20% of them had a master's degree or higher. In terms of occupation, majority of the participants were employed, with around 15% having their own jobs, 53% working in public sector, and 16% working in private sector. The density of the university graduates and civil servants among the participants can be explained by the fact that most of the undereducated people did not want to join the survey, saying they do not have enough knowledge on cultural heritage, whereas the private sector employees and self-employed people were usually busy and did not have much time to participate. The second part of the questionnaire was aimed at investigating public interest and attitude towards cultural heritage in general. Firstly, the participants were asked to define what cultural heritage means to them. Among the answers, the most commonly appearing aspects were tangible, closely followed by intangible, whereas the natural aspects were the least common. The participants mainly referred to cultural heritage as the material representation of a nation's and a place's identity. Many of them also stressed that it's an inheritance from the previous generations that should be preserved and passed on to the future generations. In this sense, the answers are closely linked to the dominant Western heritage discourse, which was emerged in the 19th century Europe and defined by Laura Jane Smith as the authorized heritage discourse. This discourse, which originally considered materiality, aesthetic value, and age value as the defining characteristics of what constitutes heritage, has been challenged in the last century, and especially in the international charters, intangible and natural heritage gained recognition. In terms of the participants of this survey, the intangible heritage as well is well recognized in the definitions of cultural heritage. However, natural heritage is not. The responses also correspond well to the dominant heritage discourse in Greece, which was shaped in the foundation of the modern state and still active today with certain alterations. According to this perception, as argued by scholars such as Hamilakis and Plantos, the material remains of the past, and especially of antiquity, serve as centerpieces in constructing the national topos by connecting the imagined nation to the material space and linking the contemporary inhabitants of the land with those glorious ancestors. After defining what cultural heritage means to them, the participants were asked on who they think cultural heritage is valuable for and what kind of values cultural heritage has. These questions were Likert scale questions, which means that they were asked to choose between a scale of 5 from strongly disagree to strongly agree. The results you see on the slide are the sum of the answers agree and strongly agree. Looking at the result, we see that the responses in Tricolor and Ceres are close to each other. The participants stated that the cultural heritage is valuable most for the humanity, followed by the states, and them personally. The lowest responses were recorded in value for local people, which could be related to the fact that as responses to some of the open-ended questions showed, people tend to think their fellow citizens do not show much interest to the cultural heritage assets in their surroundings, and they do not protect them as they should. The major value attached to cultural heritage is historical value, followed by scientific, educational, touristic, and aesthetic values. On the other hand, many of the participants do not think that heritage has a political value. Therefore, we can say that the participants of the questionnaire do not consider cultural heritage as a symbolic capital for the states. In terms of the level of knowledge regarding cultural heritage in general and visitation patterns, we can say that between 56% and 62% of the participants think they are fairly or extremely well knowledgeable on cultural heritage. And the majority of them visit archaeological sites, monuments, and museums at least once a year. These data, combined with the level of education in the demographics part, shows that the participants of the survey are well informed about cultural heritage and they visit cultural heritage sites occasionally. A bit more than half of the participants stated that cultural heritage assets belong to everybody, regardless of their origin or citizenship, whereas according to the rest, they belong to the citizens and states of the place they are located in. The World Heritage concept created by UNESCO suggests that, I quote, World Heritage sites belongs to all the peoples of the world, irrespective of the territory on which they are located, end of quote. So looking at our answers, we can say that this concept of World Heritage is not yet embraced fully by the overwhelming majority of the participants, and still many people consider the cultural heritage assets to belong to the states and people of where they are located in. When asked about the responsibility in protecting cultural heritage assets, half of the participants responded that it is everybody's responsibility, and the other half thinks it is the responsibility of regional and national authorities. In the following part of the questionnaire, the participants were asked questions regarding the Ottoman monuments in their towns. In Tricolor, almost 80% of the participants stated that they visited the Osmansha Mosque, and more than half of those were repeated visitors. For the Ottoman baths, the percentage of visitation among the participants were around 57%, and half of the participants only visited the place once. In my opinion, the reason is that the Ottoman baths were opened to the public very recently. Many locals know the building as the prisons, and since the exterior of the building does not bear the architectural characteristics of a traditional Ottoman, people are not aware that there are the remains of an Ottoman bath in the ground floor of the building. In terms of the reasons to visit, the most common reasons were visiting exhibitions, events, workshops, personal interest and curiosity, and educational trips with schools. Looking at Ceres, we can see that a bit more than half of the participants stated that they visited the Selçuk Sultan Mosque. On the other hand, majority of those who visited the monument more than once. The most stated reason of visitation was visiting exhibitions, events, and workshops. For the Vezistani, almost 80% of the participants visited the place, and same with the mosque, most of these visitors were repeated visitors. The main reason for visitation was educational visits. The differences between the numbers and motivations of visitation is related to their uses. Selçuk Sultan Mosque was restored and opened to the public relatively recently, whereas Vezistani was serving as a museum for a longer period. Furthermore, considering that the Vezistani is being used as the archaeological museum of Ceres, the museum is considered to be more important and informative, and thus attracts more visitors, as can also be seen from the educational visits made by schools. When asked about their knowledge of the Ottoman monuments in Tricolor and in Ceres, we can see that more than half of the participants said they are somewhat knowledgeable or less than that. Compared with the answers to the questions on the level of knowledge about cultural heritage in general, there is a certain decrease in the level of knowledge when it comes to the Ottoman monuments in their city. On the other hand, the eagerness to learn more about these monuments can be interpreted as a positive approach. Another positive aspect is that 90% of the participants from Tricolor think the Ottoman monuments in Tricolor are valuable for the city and its citizens. The highest value given to these monuments by the participants is the historical value, and it is followed by economic touristic value, aesthetic value, and scientific educational value. However, when the values given to Ottoman monuments in Tricolor are compared with the values given to cultural heritage in general, we can clearly see that the positive responses have decreased. A similar situation exists in Ceres' case as well. The majority of the participants think the Ottoman monuments in Ceres are valuable for the city and its citizens. The highest value given to these monuments is again the historical value, and it is followed by scientific educational value. There's a certain decrease in economic touristic value and aesthetic value when compared with the results of Tricolor. The political value is 52% in both of the cases. Again, when the values given to Ottoman monuments in Ceres by the participants are compared to the values given to cultural heritage in general, we can see that there's a decrease in the positive responses. Afterwards, participants were asked an open-ended question on who should be responsible from the protection of Ottoman monuments in Trikala and Ceres, and in more general terms, Ottoman monuments in Greece. The main categories that were identified among the answers were everybody, which included responses like all of us, all the citizens, humanity, national regional authorities, which included the municipality, prefecture, local authorities of antiquity, the government, the state, archaeologists, historians, and finally, the international organizations, which was the UNESCO or the EU. In terms of protection of the Ottoman monuments in Trikala, the majority of the participants think the main responsibility should belong to the regional and national authorities, whereas the participants who said everybody should be responsible is only as half of that. Similar results are found when the question was asked for all the monuments, for the Ottoman monuments in Greece. However, when asked who should be responsible from the protection of cultural heritage assets in general, the responses were almost equal between everybody and the authorities. Here, it can clearly be seen that although in general, the participants think they have a responsibility in protecting cultural heritage assets as much as the authorities do, when asked specifically about the protection of the Ottoman monuments, at least half of the participants do not feel a personal obligation and they think the main responsibility is on the authorities. In terms of protection of the Ottoman monuments in Ceres, the overwhelming majority of the participants think the main responsibility should belong to regional and national authorities. Similar results also apply to the question about the protection of Ottoman monuments in Greece. Again, when asked about who should be responsible from the protection of cultural heritage assets in general, we see that there was an equality between the responses that fall under the category everybody and national regional authorities. This shows that, similar to Trikala citizens, the inhabitants of Ceres tend to feel less responsibility when it comes to protecting Ottoman monuments in their town and in their country. This point is especially clear when analyzed with the results of the upcoming questions. Although more than 90% of the participants in Trikala think that the Ottoman monuments in Trikala should be preserved for the future generations, only 75% of them think they have a responsibility, personal responsibility in that. Similar results were found for the protection of the Ottoman monuments in Greece. And the results are similar in Ceres as well. In my point of view, there can be three reasons to explain this difference. First possibility is that when thinking and speaking hypothetically, such as protecting cultural heritage in general, people feel more personal responsibility and consider themselves as active agents as well. However, when it comes to practicality, they are less willing to act. The second reason is more personal, and it is related to how people define cultural heritage and define themselves personally. When feelings and emotions find a reflection on the material sphere, it fosters the feeling of responsibility. Considering that many of the participants to the survey, like the majority of the Greek people, as argued by many scholars, see their ancestors and forefathers, their personal and communal histories on the material remains of antiquity and the Byzantine period, their feelings of ownership and responsibility about those heritages are enhanced. And thirdly, it can be related with the expert knowledge attributed to the past, archaeology, and heritage. Among these three possible explanations, considering the other questions in the survey as well, I think the reason for these results are that the Ottoman monuments in Trikala and Ceres, and in more general grounds in Greece, are not considered as an important part, if any, of personal and national identities. So to sum up, according to the participants of these surveys, cultural heritage is mostly associated with tangible and intangible creations of the past and is strongly related with national and personal identities. Most of the participants believe cultural heritage belongs to all humanity and the responsibility of protection lays equally on people and authorities. Most of the participants consider the antiquity and the Byzantine heritage as a major part of their national and personal identities. Therefore, they attach more importance to the heritage of those eras. In line with the increasing efforts of preservation and the promotion of the Ottoman heritage by the Greek authorities, the survey shows that most of the participants have a positive approach towards the Ottoman monuments in their towns. They consider these monuments to add value to their respective towns and that they are a part of their town's history as well as Greece's history. Therefore, they think that these monuments should be protected and passed on to future generations. However, compared to the protection of cultural heritage assets in general, less people tend to think they have personal responsibility in the protection of these monuments, which could be related to the fact that less people consider the Ottoman heritage to be a representation of their personal and national identities. The participants were in favor of the utilization of the idle Ottoman monuments with new functions, such as museums and cultural centers. Considering the reasons for visitations to the monuments, which are already utilized in the selected towns, it is believed that restoring these monuments and providing public access would increase the locals' daily interactions with these monuments and would have a positive impact on the locals' perceptions. And last but not least, as an alumni of the Boğaziçi University, I would like to express my sincere support to all the academicians and students in their resistance against the unrightful rector appointment to Boğaziçi University. And with this, I would like to conclude my presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you indeed very much. And I can only say that it's very much a pity that COVID interfered, because it would be really, really nice to have been able to see how the counterpart of Byzantine and Greek remains in Turkey are being seen by the general public and being incorporated in the heritage of the country. Now, we have several questions already, but please feel free to ask more if you have a question. Write your questions in the Q&A, and I will make sure that I read it out and that Hakan will then try to answer it. But let's start with those questions that we have already. An anonymous attendee asked, was there a reason why there were no Muslim villages around Tricolor, despite being ruled by Muslims for around 500 years?
I'm guessing he or she is asking about now. I mean, today there are no Muslim villages. So my answer would be due to the population exchange. There are not many Muslims left in the area. So that might be a reason. And also, like during the Ottoman times, there were some big farming grounds, çiftliks in the area, and actually they owned by big landlords. So that was the how the ethnography was. But actually, I didn't focus much on the outside of the city, just in the center. So it's just an educated guess.
All right. Thank you. Melton Yashda asks, when we talk about the Ottoman heritage in Greece, the mosques are always the main and sometimes the only subject. What can you say about civil architecture? So I think part of it you have incorporated in your talk, but maybe there is more to be said. Also, domestic architecture, for example, would be very interesting.
So as Meltem says, there are also many civil architecture remaining. It can be from the mansions or like Vezistani, that kind of places, or bridges, fountains. So many different types of civil architecture still remains in Greece. But in terms of my subject, I decided to focus on the distinctive, let's say, characteristics between these nations, and these were reflected most on the religious architecture. For example, the military architecture, let's say, these castles and towers are continuously being used and rebuilt. So there is not much discussion when it comes to a castle or a fountain, but when it comes to a mosque, the contemporary issues affected by nationalisms gain more grounds, let's say. That's why I wanted to investigate them.
Can I just insert a little question? I mean, if those buildings are reused, the Ottoman monuments are reused, is the fact that they were originally built by the Ottomans forgotten, or is it still part of the general memory of the public?
I think again it depends on the type of monument. If it is a castle, most of the time it is forgotten because you cannot always find the inscriptions, for example, like saying when this castle was built. But if it was a mention of a, let's say, a landlord from that area, then they mostly know if it was Ottoman or not. About this question, I think I can give an example of the White Tower in Thessaloniki. Many people, uh, the people living in Thessaloniki or like in general Greece, consider this White Tower to be a Byzantine monument, but actually, and it is also it was left out of the book published by the Greek ministry, the Ottoman architecture in Greece. But actually, it is known that it was a Ottoman building. So that kind of things can also happen.
Okay, thank you. Sula Protopsalti, sorry if I mispronounced the Greek names. Hello from Thessaloniki. Did you get any answers for why some mosques in Ceres are fenced and closed for the public? Thank you.
Most of the time, the problem with the remaining Ottoman monuments in Greece actually is to find a contemporary function to them. In terms of Ceres, the other two are fenced because first, it's not structurally still so safe, and second, they are not being used as, I mean, they're not open as a cultural center. I don't know if there are plans to do that because I didn't have a chance to get in contact with someone from the F8. But most of the time in Greece, that is the problem. And I mean, okay, let's restore this monument, but what are we going to use it as? So then it becomes a question. Because also there are, they are funded publicly. So if you consider them, that requires a lot of investment as well to restore a monument, put a guard, an archaeologist. We're back.
I am back. Was it just me? I mean, Zoom just threw me out. Sorry, my question was probably the wrong one. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I answered the question. Yeah, but it was only you, I think.
Okay, so you just continued answering questions. Sorry for that. I don't know what happened. So Ayşegül Yılmaz asks, is there any cooperation between Greek and Turkish authorities on the restoration of these monuments?
In terms of Greece, there is not one that I'm aware of. I don't know about that, but recently Turkey is doing a lot of restorations in Balkans, like in Serbia, for example, through TIKA, but I don't know if there is one in terms of in the context of Greece.
So opposite, yes, but not, okay.
No, I mean, like the Turkish state is doing restorations in other states, like in Serbia, but I don't know if they did any in Greece.
What about opposite? Greece?
Well, I'm not sure about that either. Yeah.
Okay. Lynn Chanel asks, hello, thank you for this very informative talk. In the graphs titled, who should be responsible from the protection of Ottoman monuments in Ceres, Greece, we can see that some people answered the Ottomans and some answered Turkey. Could you please elaborate on whom the poll takers would mean by the Ottomans? Yeah, indeed. And as I'm curious, how can a defunct empire pay for the protection of its monuments?
Yeah, I wanted to, I mean, it was just actually one participant who said that, but I wanted to include that to show that actually some, not a majority, very little percentage of responses can come like that. But of course, I mean, there's no such thing as the Ottoman Empire anymore, so they cannot do anything. But I think it was important to include that, to show that like it is not ours but theirs. So that was also the reason why I put them like, okay, who should be responsible for them? It is not ours, so let it be Ottoman or whoever cares. For example, some people says who, and some people said like who has the resources for them. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to include that.
Resources is of course also an ever returning topic. Yeah. Tuğrul Acar asked, says, thank you for the presentation. Have you asked local people about the monuments that do not exist anymore and that were demolished? For example, the old mosque or Eski Cami in Ceres was demolished in the 1930s. How is the local knowledge about these demolished monuments? Do they have any knowledge?
Actually, one of the limitations of my research was that I don't speak fluently Greek. So that was the reason also I had people helping me out. But so for Ceres case, I don't know. I mean, I didn't get in first contact with these people, but in Tricolor, for example, while we were doing the questionnaires, I was sitting at a cafe, and Katerina was going and asking to people sitting at the cafe. I mean, you have to order something to sit there, you know, give out the questionnaires. That was the reason, obviously. So some elderly gentlemen invited me also to their table, and we had a long conversation, and they were actually like very nostalgic about all those these mosques that used to stand in Tricolor, but they don't anymore because they were demolished for building some new apartment blocks or some new constructions. So they were telling about their personal histories and stories, like how they used to spend time in the garden of the mosque while they skipped school or something. So this kind of stories, when they have these personal stories, actually like that creates a big attachment to the local people as well. So in terms of Ceres, I don't know, but when I could get these stories, that was actually very nice additions for my research and very important. But I couldn't do that all the time, unfortunately.
Sula Protopsalti again says, I would like to invite you to Thessaloniki because there is an unknown but great mosque in a former military camp. And although the state managed to move it in order to save it because of a new road, now it's fenced and closed for the public. Is there any chance to contact someone in Turkey in order to restore it? I'm asking this because I'm currently working as a museologist in the in the municipality of Pavlos Melas, in which this mosque is, and I'm trying to highlight the mosque's issue.
Well, I would love to visit Thessaloniki for sure, but to get in contact, maybe I can just write my email to the chat.
Of course, Sula can also get in contact with the BIAA, and we will make sure that Hakan gets the question. That's another option. So please reach out. Fahri Dikaya asks, did you face any nationalistic or religious reactions during your survey?
Not to me personally, because my limitation was also kind of an, let's say, something good, because instead of a Turkish person talking to Greek citizens about the Ottoman mosques or Turkish Muslim mosques in their towns, it was a Greek citizens talking about them. So most probably they were more open and unbiased, let's say. But during the questionnaire, some people got obviously mad and left the questionnaire, and some of them like just took notes. These, like for example, the Ottoman monuments of Tricolor are just a small part of the history of this town. We have so many other great and more important things. Why is this questionnaire only about them? But yeah, it was my research. But personally, I mean, like during my time in Greece as well, I did my master's there, and then during my PhD studies, I was again in Greece. I personally didn't get any thing like that from any locals or yeah.
Christoph Bachhuber asks, says, thanks Hakan, and asks, can you please comment on the educated, non-educated divide in your respondees? How significant is the gap or absence for your results? Did you consider an alternative methodology for non-educated participants?
Actually, I didn't do a correlation analysis yet to see if there's like a meaningful difference between the, let's say, the level of education and the but yeah, if I had like a more time maybe, and if I was working with an anthropologist maybe, or if I was an anthropologist myself, I would actually love to do more in-depth interviews instead of a questionnaire, which was like 40 questions in total, and it was like a little bit of everything, a Likert scale, a multiple choice, and open-ended. So unfortunately, it wasn't easy to reach out to all different groups, let's say, but I had to limit myself somehow.
Indeed, 40 questions is also not nothing. That takes quite a while, no, before it's being answered. Or was it all multiple choice? No.
No, it wasn't. I mean, not all of them wrote for the open-ended ones. Yeah. But okay. Yeah.
All right, Barish Altan asks, says, thank you for your presentation, and asks whether you asked the participants whether they have ever been to Turkey and seen an Ottoman building outside of their own town and country. Do you plan to execute exactly the same questionnaire in Turkey, or do you plan to modify it?
As I said, I didn't get in one-to-one contact most of the time, so I didn't ask them if they've been to Turkey or did they saw any Ottoman monuments in Greece or any part in the Balkans. So I cannot say anything to that. But for the Turkish part, I'm going to do very much similar in order to kind of compare them. But of course, it depends on the monuments in the city. Now I'm thinking of Iznik and Trabzon. For example, in Tricolor, there wasn't a mosque standing alone. I mean, like the mosque there was, it was being used already. So I couldn't ask if would you prefer this mosque to be restored and used again? But in Ceres, I could. So there can be small modifications like this, depending on the case. But most of the other parts, I'm going to use the same.
An anonymous attendee says, thank you for your great presentation, and asks, did you do any research about Ottoman heritage in national or international archives? I think there can be some religious buildings which were destructed. How is the local awareness about these demolished buildings? And isn't it important for your ongoing PhD thesis? So a lot of questions.
Yeah, I didn't do any archival research, but yeah, as it says, and also not the religious monuments. I mean, a lot of historical monuments are destroyed. And for example, if you think about it, from the beginning of the Greek state, it wasn't only the Ottoman monuments. I mean, it was the Byzantine churches as well, or for example, the most known example is the works on the Athenian Acropolis, the destruction of the Frankish tower, etc. So it wasn't only the Ottoman mosque, but in terms of these actual cases, Tricolor and Ceres, I could maybe do a little bit more research on them, and if I manage to go there again, because I would definitely want to talk to the municipality and F4H once again. So if I go there again, maybe I can try to kind of do a little bit of different, let's say, additional interviews with the locals.
Maybe something that is related to the just previous questions from the chat. Sotiris Dimitriadis asks, I'm curious to know why the methodological focus on provincial towns?
Okay, because I wanted to, as I said, like include these monuments standing in the town centers, but not very much connected to the architecture of the surroundings. So that is why I choose a monument in the city other than a monument, for example, left alone in a village or something. And also it's about when I focus on public perceptions, I mean, I need to find some people to talk to, basically. So if it's a monument left alone, or if it's, for example, a monument in a very big city or in touristic city like Athens, I didn't consider, for example, implementing the Fethiye Mosque Athens, because who's the local inhabitant of Athens, basically. So that's why I wanted to select cities that are not so small, but also not so big as well, and that, you know, I could kind of get an idea of who the inhabitants are.
Okay. Mikhail Lichunas says congrats and suggests that you also look into the change of the legal framework, which included buildings up to 1830, now all automatically listed. So that's a suggestion. Slavka Karakusheva says, thank you for the interesting and thought-provoking presentation. I wonder what the concept of cultural heritage means and includes to and for the public institutions and their representatives, those who have the position of expert to take decisions regarding heritage issues or politics in Greece, and to the local citizens of both cities in Greece. Does heritage mean the same thing for the different actors in the heritizing process, or are there nuances? Is there a cleavage, conflicts in perceptions?
So for the states part, I mean, I'm also reading the books of and writings of other scholars, so because I'm not so knowledgeable on the, let's say, Greek archaeology and how it works. So I can just, I mean, probably he or she already knows like who to read. But I'm also doing that. I'm just using the secondary sources, let's say, instead of trying to find my original data. In the perception of the state, I am just thinking of focusing on the municipalities and the local FRAs, local branches of the FRAs. It's not easy to, actually, that could be kind of a whole new and standalone PhD project anyway.
That's for after your PhD project, after
Yeah.
your PhD, indeed. So Daniel Serb says, many thanks for this really interesting presentation. And then asks, concerning restoration of monuments, who has the driving force? Did restoration start from governmental initiatives, or for example, did EU funding play a role, or from the wider public, i.e. the local city population? In how far tourist interests were involved? And several questions, yeah.
Yeah. In terms of funding, the EU funding definitely helps because there is more resources. So the FRA and the ministry can apply to, you know, get this funding. So it is definitely a positive factor. And I don't know who was the driving force. Okay, for my cases, the Chichanis Museum and the old prison building were in Tricolor, the Ottoman bath. It was the municipality. After the prison was no longer in use, they wanted to transform the building into a cultural center so that they could make some income out of it, basically. And while they were doing that, they discovered the Ottoman baths, and then the FRA comes in and does all the restorations and that kind of stuff. But about the others, I'm not really sure, because I mean it's not like there are ongoing projects. Like, let's say it didn't happen 20 years ago. I mean, there was already some from the scholar side, let's say, interest in these monuments. But how did it get to in the, let's say, the administrative level? How did it get to the point they decided to move on and do the actual restorations? I don't know.
Okay. Giovanni Gasbari says, thanks Hakan, excellent job. And then asks, during your research, have you ever perceived the intention to fabricate a specific interpretation of the past, either Byzantine or Ottoman, through specific kinds of architectural restoration?
Okay, so I'm not actually an architectural historian, so yeah, well, I'm not an archaeologist as well, so it wouldn't be very correct if I, say that there was such a thing.
Okay, and I think that immediately also answers the question from Alex Rodriguez, who asks what the standards of the Turkish restoration, the restorations by Turkey in the Balkan, for instance, are. So Andrew Peterson says, oh, missed the first part of the presentation. Did you also consider synagogues?
Actually, no, I didn't, because I wanted to make a comparable study between Greece and Turkey, and just focused on the Byzantine churches in Turkey and the Ottoman mosques or some other Ottoman era monuments in Greece. I didn't consider the synagogues.
Right,
but about the previous, about the previous question, I mean, my background in education is from tourism administration, and then I made a master's degree on heritage management. So basically, I came from that kind of background, and this is the reason I'm mostly focusing on, let's say, the contemporary functions, how these monuments are being utilized, and that kind of aspects, instead of like how good the restoration was, or
Okay. Fahri Dikaya asks whether you have used the Turkish names of these cities in your survey as cultural heritage and past, or have you used the Greek names?
No, I used the Greek names, but I mean, most of them are very similar anyway. Trikala turns to Tricolor, but it was tricky in the antiquity, so, or Ceres, Syros. But when I was referring to the cities in the questionnaires, I wrote them in Greek, so they were all in Greek names.
All right, and then we have a long remark, and probably there are some questions inside as well, from Ioannis Poulios, who says a couple interesting presentation, a couple of remarks. Firstly, regarding the approach of the Greek state towards Ottoman sites and structures, it is important to stress that until recently, only sites and structures that date until 1453, so the end of the Byzantine era, were declared national heritage, while the post-1453 sites required a special and separate decision to be recognized as such. Yet today, all sites and structures dating until 1830, I think that was also mentioned earlier, are automatically declared heritage. This means that a largest part of Ottoman sites and structures are automatically declared heritage by the Greek state. Secondly, regarding the Tricolor mosques, the national heritage authorities decided to demolish the prison associated to the World War II and the Greek Civil War in order to protect and present the mosque. This could indicate that it is not only an issue of the approach toward Ottoman heritage, but it is part of a more complex discussion of prioritizing among diverse heritage sites, such as, and he mentions also the Tricolor paths.
I would like to thank very much, especially for the second point. I'm definitely going to look into that. About the laws and regulations, I consider them on the state's perception, which of course affects the people perception as well. So I'm aware of the new law and how it was evolved from the beginning of the Greek state. And he's right. And just something to add, they are automatically declared heritage, but there is still a difference, which is like the structures, the monuments that were built before 1453 are also automatically state-owned. On the other hand, the ones that were built, let's say in the Ottoman era or the post-Byzantine era, can be individually owned. So that's a nuance difference, but an important one, I think.
This person, Ioannis, has said made some more remarks in the chat. So I'll make sure that you have everything that is in the chat as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Dimitris Plantos asks, do you know if Greeks in Tricolor or Ceres view Byzantine heritage in Turkey as part of their own heritage?
I don't know about that. I mean, I didn't include them in the questions, or I didn't do any other research on that, so I don't know about that.
Would be interesting to find out. But
well, he's my advisor as well, co-advisor. So I'm guessing we are going to have a long discussion on Skype soon.
All right. Mikhail Lichournas asks, says, the vast majority of the Ottoman era public monuments belong to public bodies, excluding some domestic buildings. The initially usually comes from the Ministry of Culture authorities, which seeks funding mainly from the EU. So that's actually in response to an earlier question.
Thank you very much.
In the chat, there was also a remark from somebody from the BIAA. I saw you have lots and lots of people in the chat as well. So Anthony Shepherd, the BIAA honorary treasurer, says a very interesting and worthwhile project. It would be interesting to compare these results with the ones of the BIAA Living Amid the Ruins projects. The survey among villagers living in what was Roman era Pisidia in the Taurus Mountains to the north of Antalya. It's a different setting, of course, but it is also a wide survey of people still living among the ruins, to see their answers would indeed be two different parts of a coin. So let me see whether there are still questions. Thank you so much.
In addition to that, Sarat project and its results will be also very important for the
public survey, I can imagine. Yeah. Okay. The focus of, wait a minute. Mikhail Lichunas, there's another question. Another interesting point should be to include the origin of the respondees, whether they are descendants of exchanged people or locals.
Actually, I thought about that, and I talked to my advisors and some colleagues about that, but I decided not to include that question. First of all, I didn't think I could get a lot of answers to that, and secondly, it could be, kind of uncomfortable to start the questions like that, and so I didn't want to do that. But if I was doing like with a smaller group, let's say not 100 people, but I don't know, 20, 30 people, and open-ended questions or like interviews, then it could definitely come up. I mean, if they had any origins maybe from the Asia Minor, and that could also connect to the question of Professor Plantos, if they consider the Byzantine heritage in Turkey as their heritage. Or in that kind of setting, it could also be asked whether they are from descendants of refugees from Asia Minor or not. Do they consider this Byzantine heritage as theirs? then it could, it could be asked in a different setting.
But I think that the numbers of interviews you did is very impressive. I mean, it's nice overview. Elias Kolovos says, congratulations to Hakan for this research. According to my view, his questionnaire findings show that the public in Greece has improved a lot in recent years towards a better appreciation of the Ottoman architecture in Greece, maybe for touristic reasons. We should not ignore the important work made by the archaeological ephorias in Greece and the education system. Do you have any ideas about how similar questionnaires would look like in Turkey, or what the answers would be?
I would like to.
The end I added, as you saw.
Yeah, okay. I would like to ask him as well, because we had a very nice conversation about my project, and he had very nice recommendations while I was in Athens, and I still owe him a coffee. So maybe next time I go back. But I think he's right about that. It's about the changes in the education system mostly, and these education systems as museums and all this kind of let's say tools are being used by the states to implement, or let's say their own ideology, so the national discourses. So when the state becomes more tolerant and accepting towards this heritage, it is obviously taught in that way, and like the small kids are taking to the Ottoman mosques as a school excursions. So it's definitely a very important point, and maybe like it is actually the reason how these results are so positive. And about Turkey, I really don't know, because before I did my questionnaires in Greece, I wasn't also so sure that, I mean, I didn't expect this kind of very positive approaches and very positive results. So in Turkey, about the Byzantine heritage, I'm not very optimistic as well, but I don't know how it will turn out, because I think the problem, the main difference between the contemporary Greek society and the contemporary Turkish society is, I haven't seen any Greek person or any Greek citizens who says we should turn these mosques into churches. But unfortunately, in Turkey, it is still working in that sense. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, like all the Hagia Sophias we've seen, it's started with Iznik and Trabzon, and then now Istanbul. So it's obviously, if it's that in the state part, it has some grounds on the public part as well. So that's why I'm not very optimistic, but we never know.
Well, that said, I mean, Sarat, the public survey in Sarat did indicate that people were very interested, but were not always sure how to deal with all the heritage. So maybe you will be surprised, like Sarat, the Sarat team was as well. So Işılay Gürsu says, my question was lost in the Q&A, and that may very well be because Zoom kicked me out for a moment. So if there are other questions that we haven't asked and that you think, please, I would like an answer, just post them again. And Işılay says, thank you very much, Hakan. You have so far interviewed an exceptionally highly educated group of people in Greece. For various reasons that might not be the case in Turkey. So how would you approach that in your comparative process and comparative purpose? Because
that will definitely be a problem, which I'm aware of, and also I think also these cases within themselves are not very comparable. Like even the ones in Greece or even the ones in Turkey, if you think about Iznik and Trabzon, I mean, how could you compare? They're like two different settings. So what I have in mind in terms of like to make a real comparison is about the state perceptions, which is like the laws and regulations and how these heritages are being used by the state contemporarily. So I think the biggest or like the most successful comparative approach will be on that sense about, let's say, the laws and regulations on cultural heritage. In people's perspective, I should try to, approach the more educated people, obviously. I don't know, because this COVID situation will still create a big problem for me in order to get a sample as random as possible. I don't think it will be very possible. So maybe I should just alter it in the way that in the end, the questions, the responses I have from Turkey could be comparable with the ones from Turkey. So like, if I'm not going to be able to do it as random as possible, and if I'm going to choose, people to make to do the questionnaires with because of COVID, then I might try to reach out to people who have university degree and such, at least a portion of it. I don't know. I mean, I didn't think much of it, but as a comparative basis, as I said, it will mostly be on the state's perception.
Okay. Michael Lichounas says, in response to what you said about the conversion of churches and everything, like the Hagia Sophias, he says conversion happened in Greece as well, but before World War II, like in Drama, Kavala, etc. Anonymous attendee says, as your research shows us, why do you think that people feel less personal responsibilities in protection of the cultural heritage for the Ottoman remains, I suppose? Do you think the political problems between the countries cause this problem? Or is it because people are not educated in these fields?
I think it's about the political problems between countries, because there was a case while I was working in Tricolor. I saw the article from a newspaper that after the conversion of Hagia Sophia to a mosque, some people threw rocks at the mosque in Tricolor. But then the mayor of Tricolor made a public statement and said this heritage belongs to all of us, and it should be, restored, and it should be respected and treated as the other monuments of the city. So I think these political problems definitely create some cause this, but about the education, I'm not sure, because some people, when they were replying, for example, they said like the responsibility belongs to the F8 and the state and the archaeologists, but also to the citizens, for example, to keep them clean or not to make graffiti on them. So I think people are aware that most of the people, or the respondents, let's say, are aware that there's a certain limitation to the things they can do, but they are not expected to go and restore the monument. They're, just keep the environment clean, do not write stuff on them. I think that kind of stuff.
Okay.
A little bit of both, but yeah.
Daniel Joseph MacArthur Seal, the BIAA Assistant Director, says, did you come across any views regarding the use of historic mosques for worship by recently arrived Muslim residents of Greece? Do you think religious use would be less well received by the public than the secular purposes that mosque buildings are now, Ottoman mosque buildings are now often used for?
I haven't seen a case like that. I haven't been to the Trajan part, so Thrace part. I don't know about the monuments there, like the Muslim and stuff. But in Trikala and Ceres, there were no such monuments. But about question on the religious use, I definitely agree. And I also think that these monuments are kind of like the religious monuments are kind of purified in a way that you could see from the beginning of my presentation. There was a photo with the mihrab, and an inscription of it was just laid down next to it. So basically, in this book, what Hamilakis suggests is there are like 3 things that the states do. For example, One is the clearance, and the second is, like, for example, rebuilding of important and reconstructing of important these monuments, and making like a distinction, a separation. So I think the presentation of the relics of antiquity and the Byzantine era in these monuments kind of work as a purification. I'm not suggesting that this was done on purpose, but I do believe that this acts as such in terms of the people's perceptions. So if they would be using them contemporarily as a mosque, I think for many people that wouldn't be very acceptable.
Okay, and on that note, we brought the topic up to today. I think, Hakan, that you owe us a second lecture when you're done with your PhD, so that we can hear about what the Turkish side says, and how the responses and the treatment compare or not. So thank you very much to Hakan. Good luck with the rest of your research. And like I said, we expect you back. And thank you for everybody to come and listen. You may have seen that there are several more lectures coming up, and Daniel has just posted in the chat how you can reach us and how you can keep updated on BIAA events. And now the BIAA cat decides that she too has to be in part of the event, so can't go wrong. So thanks a lot, and thank you also for listening and for participating in the, I think, very interesting question session after the lecture. Have a nice evening for those of you in this part of the world, a nice day for others of us, and hope to see you again soon at one of the future and upcoming BIAA events. Bye-bye.